President ONeill, France, members of the governing board, thank you very much for asking for this opportunity to share our coming back to school plans and protocols. We have a few people that are going to be presenting information to you today. I encourage you to write down any questions that you have and let us kind of get through the presentation. We can always go back to anything and answer any questions that you might have. But before I turn it over to Melissa Gonzalez, our Deputy Superintendent in charge of schools, I do want to kind of give us some numbers right now. We know how many of our students are going to be on distance learning and on-campus learning. We gave you that information last week. But I want to kind of tell you that there's a date that's coming up that's March 11th. March 11th was the day that I called our governing board members that we had on last year, and I told them that we were going to be closing schools because we were not quite sure how to deal with the pandemic. So our kids, when we get to March 11th, would have actually been out of school for that entire year. And if you think of the amount of days in a year, well, then you know that. But school days, it's about 180 when we get to that point. So we're excited to be able to bring them back for about 39, 40 days before we actually start our robust summer school. But I thought we want to keep that in mind as we move forward and as we give you this information. So now I'll turn it over to Melissa Gonzalez. Brought your own, all right.
Good evening, Madam President ONeill, France, governing board members, Superintendent Islas. Thank you for this opportunity for us to share with you our return to school process. We have many people to thank for their efforts, beginning with those staff members who are a part of the ACT committee, which came together some time back, which seems like forever ago. We had so many members at that time of representatives across our district help us put together this amazing plan. So we thank them. But we also thank all the people along the way of this year who have put in time and effort to collaborate on what is the safest and best approach to be able to come back in person. We have had representatives from our classified staff across the schools and across the district, from our certified staff across schools and district, and from all of our district leadership staff. It truly has been a collaboration of the Alhambra familia. And to get our presentation started, I would like to pass our mic over to Mr. Raul Ruiz.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, Madam President ONeill, France, governing board members, Mr. Islas, Alhambra community. It is our pleasure tonight to present to you our next phase of the great deal of planning that has been taking place, as Mr. Islas has pointed out, well for about a year now. And so we want to share with you tonight as an extension of last week's presentation, where we're at and how we're preparing for a fourth quarter return to in-person learning. As mentioned last week, on the 5th of February, we sent out surveys to families. And during the week of the 8th, schools worked tirelessly to capture all of that feedback back from our families. And overwhelmingly, we received close to 99% of responses from families and learned that half of our district wants to come back in person. And so tonight, as we present to you our plans for a fourth quarter return to in-person learning for half of our students, we want to, with great detail, paint the best picture we can for what it looks like a day in the life for a student and a staff member. During this process of planning, we are prepared to return, and here is what we've done, and that is what we intend to share with you tonight. We designed and built a number of safety protocols. We engaged a number of stakeholders. As Ms. Gonzalez pointed out, our committee of ACT task force members exceeded 100, and that was just the direct committee work that was happening to really put together the framework. The countless others in the district, and even including families who helped to inform these practices and really paint a picture for how it would look to return to school safely, exceeds that 100 tenfold. And I just want to say that there have been a tremendous amount of people who have been a part of this. We have researched and been guided by state and health agencies in our preparedness for this work and what we're going to share with you. We've created a number of systems and procedures, and we've also informed and trained a number of our stakeholder groups throughout the district, from school leaders to school office staff teams to teachers and everybody in between, to really paint the picture for what a safe return looks like during our Q4. Recently, the CDC outlined its updated guidance for safely returning to school, and among all the pieces of information in that document were 5 key mitigation strategies for a safe return. And they include consistent and correct use of masks, physical distancing to the largest extent possible, and a little caveat here, AESD had 3 feet as its initial expectation for distancing in school. I call your attention to that because while it is not the 6 feet, it was during a time where we anticipated trying to get all students back to campus in November. With half of our district electing to remain in distance learning, we're now working with half the number of students, and so the 6-foot distancing becomes a lot more of a viable reality in our schools. So I just wanted to share with you that while it reads 3 feet minimum, that was as we were contemplating bringing back all students last semester. Hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette is among the 5. Cleaning and disinfection, along with contact tracing in collaboration with Maricopa County and the Department of Public Health. What I'd like to celebrate with you this evening is that these 5 mitigation strategies have been a part of our protocol practices planning from day one. And we were happy to see that these were all reinforced in the CDC's guidance, and happy to share with you that what you will hear tonight has been part of the planning that has included these 5 very specific measures that will really help to greatly reduce rates of infection. From the very onset of our ACT task force and our Healthy Traffic Light Committee work, there have been a number of folks who've been involved in the planning of what that's going to look like as it relates to the protocols for different places on campuses, for what that looks like on the bus, what that looks like for specials. And we're happy tonight to have among that group of people, one of the gentlemen who's been very instrumental in the planning of that, one of our very own teachers, Mr. Stephen Combs, who tonight presents this to you not only as a member of the Healthy Traffic Light Committee, but as a teacher who is sharing this information from his perspective, from his work, from the work of that community, that will really help to paint a picture for what this will look like from a teacher's lens. Mr. Combs, please, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruiz. Madam President, members of the governing board, and Mr. Islas, the Healthy Traffic Light, which has been provided in our reopening plans, is our guiding document for keeping everyone safe during in-person instruction. Today, I want to make the connection between the document and what it looks like on campuses. All of the materials referenced in this presentation have links, and board members have hard copies. So if you click on any of the links, they will take you to the appropriate places in the Healthy Traffic Light or whatever document's being referenced. When we return, all campuses are returning at red level 1 with the most stringent mitigation protocols in place. At that time, later, principals are given the ability to determine if their campus is able to move to yellow based on guidance from the CDC, the Arizona Department of Health, Maricopa County Department of Health, and campus stakeholders. The Healthy Traffic Light Committee has planned for each part of a student's day, from when they travel to campus until they arrive home. The relevant pages of the Healthy Traffic Light are linked in this presentation. That's another example. For getting to and from campus, there's a plan for each method that a student would travel, whether this is by bus, parent drop-off, or walking. For bus riders, as the students board the bus, they sanitize their hands and are greeted by the bus driver. Visibly sick students or students that aren't feeling well are given a safety seat at the front of the bus. These students will go directly to the isolation room when they arrive on campus and will be given breakfast there. Other students have assigned seats with members of their household or on-campus cohort groups. All of the students will be wearing masks, and the bus driver will be able to provide masks if needed. On the bus, the windows and hatches are open to maximize fresh air for passengers. Students identified as symptomatic on the bus will be escorted to the isolation room when they get to campus. If a student is dropped off by parents, a staff member will screen them for COVID symptoms in the presence of the parent so they can be taken home directly if they are symptomatic. Each group also has a different designated entry point where they're met by staff members. At the end of each day, each group will leave through their designated exits planned on each campus. Bus riders will again load the bus from back to front and sit in assigned seats by household and campus cohorts. In the presentation, we also have a video clip of what it might look like for students on a bus. As students arrive to campus, they're greeted at their entry point for a short symptom screening using the When to See a Nurse poster. That's linked in the document. This poster is visually shows symptoms, what symptoms look like, and will allow students to be screened quickly, even with limited English. At that point, students will be provided with breakfast and sent to class to wash their hands before eating. Their teacher will greet them at the door and perform a more thorough symptom screening using the poster. If a student has any symptoms, then the teacher will contact the nurse for guidance. Students that are symptomatic will likely be sent to the isolation room, and students that are healthy take masks off, eat breakfast, wash their hands again when they're finished. Each campus has 2 nursing spaces, the health office for treating students with non-COVID needs, and an isolation room for treating students with COVID symptoms. Multiple layers of symptom screening are designed to find kids that might have COVID before they enter the classroom, so they can be sent home to the isolation room before being in contact with other students or staff. Nurses also have extensive plans for managing students with COVID symptoms, positive COVID cases, routine health office referrals, and even a protocol for when there is no nurse. All these plans are guided by the CDC, Arizona Department of Health Services, Maricopa Department of Health Services, and best practices from school nurses around the globe. Some of the artifacts that are linked on this page of this presentation include the flyer that will be given to parents of symptomatic students. This gives parents guidelines on what to do next, and it is also translated into multiple languages. Also linked on here is the COVID-19 symptom student management plan that directs health office staff in their decision-making about how to proceed with symptomatic students when a teacher contacts them at any point in the day. The first day students return will likely be like many first days of school. Students will see their classroom for the first time, meet their teacher in person, and learn procedures for being at school. The school will collect important contact and medical information and communicate important information about being on campus in the attestation form and parent waiver, which have been translated into multiple languages. Even though the students have been in school for 7 months, the main focus of the day will be learning the procedures for being on campus and really just remembering how much fun it is to be at school. Some artifacts linked on this page include the attestation form, which explains responsibilities and expectations for being on campus. Also, there's an example of student information, which isn't linked, and of course, the healthy traffic light. And so I'd also like to show you a video clip of what students would look like going in their classrooms. And you should know that's actually a classroom of 18 desks. And there's, you should notice that on the floor around all the desks are the spaces where the students are able to be, marked off with tape, all spaced appropriately apart based on our healthy traffic light guidance. In the classroom, you can expect to see students sitting at least 3 feet apart. Obviously, more space allows, and at least a 6-foot space around the teacher. Spaces will be clearly delineated following guidance from the Healthy Workplace Liaison. Procedures will be in place for excellent hand hygiene, with hand washing, hand sanitizing happening at least hourly, and students not sharing supplies. Each classroom will have a seating chart, and students will work with a consistent partner to allow for contact tracing when someone is diagnosed with COVID. In grades where students would normally change classes, teachers will be changing instead of students in order to reduce transitions and untraceable contacts. So seating charts are a key mitigation factor to enable students and staff that might have COVID to quarantine and prevent the spread to other people by identifying close contacts. A close contact is within 6 feet of an infected person for 15 minutes within a 24-hour time period, or physical contact with an infected person. Seating charts in all areas where students are closer than 6 feet of each other for an extended amount of time allows for tracing and quarantine of all close contacts. This can include classrooms, buses, cafeteria, and anywhere else that we might think of. In classes with less students returning to on-campus in person, students will be able to sit further apart, which leads to less close contacts and less students needing to quarantine. So this is actually 24 students from my class right now. And if we keep them in a good seating chart like this, we can always track who our close contacts are going to be. So if one of our students gets COVID, these students that are directly around him are going to count as close contacts because they're within that 6 feet. And so we'd be looking at 8 close contacts that are out of school as distance learners for 14 days, and our COVID student that's out for 10 days. With less students, we can space kids out even more, which leads to many less close contacts, as you can see in this image. That's a quarter of the close contacts that we had when we had a full class of 24, which we had initially planned for. So less students means less close contacts, even as few as 0, which means we'll have 0 students out quarantining. The highlight of many students' day is their specials classes, and being back on campus gives students better access to their specials classes. Each special area has a section of the Healthy Traffic Light that provides guidance on activities that are appropriate for the different levels. While campuses are on Red Level 1, art, music, choir, and band teachers will come to students' classrooms to reduce transitions. While PE will be held outside or in the gym to increase space between students and allow them to have a break from wearing the mask. At lunch, students will wash their hands before eating lunch. Students will not need to enter their lunch numbers and will all receive a hot lunch in a disposable container with disposable utensils. Each campus has the flexibility to use spaces outside of the cafeteria so that students can be more than 6 feet apart while eating. In cases where additional space is not available, students will have a seating chart in the cafeteria to allow for contact tracing. And you can see an example of that in one of the pictures. Distance learning students will still receive 7 days of meals on Wednesdays, and community members and families are still able to be supported. Recess will undoubtedly still be a favorite time of day for many students, since it will still be a chance to play, exercise, relax, and remove the mask. To ensure that recess is safe, students will need to stay at least 6 feet apart when unmasked. Each campus has been provided additional staff to ensure that there is sufficient duty coverage to make sure students that choose to take off their mask stay 6 feet apart. To limit contacts and maintain contact tracing, students will be assigned play spaces as a cohort group during times when other groups are at recess, which you can see an example of in the image on this slide. This includes lunch recess and other recess periods throughout the day. All students will again wash their hands after each recess. During normal times, a school's front office can be a very busy place, but that will be very different this year. To limit contacts, the front office is closed to all except those that have essential business in the office. While in the office, everyone will need to wear a mask and remain 6 feet apart. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Raul Ruiz to speak with you some more.
Thank you, Mr. Combs. What a fantastic illustration of much of the great work that has happened both in your committee, outside of the committee, and thank you for presenting from your perspective as a teacher tonight of what these practices could look like in these different considerations. I want to call our attention now to the safe and cleanliness of our campuses. We do have systems and procedures. Campuses have been marked for safe traveling of students and staff. Every campus has had an antimicrobial application of the MicroShield 360, as we've spoken before, on all horizontal surfaces. And every campus will have regular daily cleaning completed with specific chemicals that are safe for schools and work with the MicroShield 360 treated surfaces. In fact, I'm going to share a video here that includes what that will look like. As you can see, a thorough cleaning will take place both on Wednesdays and on Fridays or Saturdays, twice a week deep cleaning, as was part of our original plan to ensure that the classrooms remain very clean and prepared for students to return the next day. I want to call our attention to one of the graphics on the slide here that includes some information regarding the MicroShield. If you take a look on the far left there on the second bullet, among the many different places where this has been applied, classrooms, restrooms, offices, conference rooms, cafeterias, kitchens, MPRs, gyms, bleachers, playgrounds, equipments, and buses. Yes, the MicroShield has been applied in our school buses so that too remains a very safe place for our students to exist and allow for a thorough, clean experience that is for traveling to and from schools. Also want to call your attention to the HVAC consideration there on the far right. In the past, we have used the MERV 8 filters, and we are actually upgrading those 5 levels to the MERV 13, and that is a recommendation by the CDC. In addition to enhancing the efficiency of these filters, we are also changing them 6 times a year as opposed to the 4-time cycle that was formerly in place there. So as you can see, a good deal of work to really ensure that our environments remain clean and safe for our students. Now, we have designed a number of different learning models, and I'm going to invite Principal Stacy O'Rourke to come chat about some of those instructional models as they relate to what the actual classroom will look like with teaching.
Good evening. Principals have worked collaboratively with staff members to determine what models will work best for their school. As a result, schools have chosen one of these 3 types of instructional models to implement that you see on the screen. One instructional model that will be implemented includes what we refer to as the virtual in-person model. In this model, the teacher will teach both the in-person students and the virtual students simultaneously. Another instructional model that will be implemented is a combination of an on-campus classroom and a distance learning classroom. In this model, teachers will either have a classroom that has only in-person learners or a classroom that has only distance learning students. Schools are implementing the model that was determined to work best for their campus to ensure the safety for all of their students. For teachers that have opted for the virtual in-person model, otherwise known as the hybrid model, for their classroom, we have worked with educational services to provide a training on different methods of delivery of the instruction for this model. There are several configurations that teachers can use to deliver instruction when working in the virtual in-person model. These configurations provide options for the teacher to have equal access to both their students in person and also their virtual learners. With all the delivery options, teachers are able to leverage all of the classroom technology tools that they are currently comfortable using. Principals have put support systems in place so teachers are comfortable instructing in the classroom. As the principal of Madrid, I would like to share one of the examples of a support system that we have implemented at our school. So recently, one of our teachers has begun practicing what she would call the virtual and in-person learning. So she has her classroom set up. Right now, she has her distance learning students, and then she also has teddy bears and stuffed animals as the students in her classroom. She's been working with her own online students and practicing the different models so that they can hear her and they can see her when she's moving around the classroom. So as a result, and we know that she's doing that, we asked her if she would feel comfortable having other people watch her. And so we've set up a system on our campus where our teachers' classrooms are being covered so that they can go in, work with her, and see how she has set up her classroom, and also how she's utilizing all of the technology so that they are comfortable seeing a teacher do that. We've provided the support by covering the classrooms of the teachers so that they do not have to go during their prep time and that they can stay as long as they need to. At all of our schools, principals have been providing various SEL supports to the teachers, and we want to make sure that our teachers really feel comfortable walking into this new learning model. So I'd like to hand it back over to Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Ork. I'm excited to share this next slide because last week during the board meeting, it was noted that we really need to pay particular attention to the social and emotional needs of our students. And we are prepared to meet the social and emotional needs of our students who've been off campus for a year now. And I want to share with you an email that Mr. Combs just recently shared with our group that comes from a student to him. And the student writes, "Hey, Mr. Combs, I just wanted to tell you that I know I haven't been doing a very good job in your class or any of my classes, but I really want you to know that I'm going to try, and I just don't want to give up my motivation in doing, I don't want to do anything anymore. So if you think you can help me, please do. Have a good night." And as you can hear in the message from that student, there's a call for support and a call for some real opportunity to feel a little bit more normal again. And really delighted to share with you that among the supports that we have put in place here are some social, emotional, and learning supports for both students and our adults. The district SEL team has worked very hard with the support of a number of different folks from Ed Services to school leaders, and recently the team brought in Touchstone Health Services to present to staff with a training called Staff Wellbeing and Adult SEL Training, with the intent of this presentation to support our employees as they prepare for a return to school experience. Now, in the slide here, you can see that there are a number of live links here. If you click on them, they will bring up the document that is being built to support the social and emotional needs of our students and staff. And the MTSS SEL committee has created this Return to School Social and Emotional Learning Support Schools book, which provides a number of different resources here. And I just want to kind of scroll through some of the pages. You can see here we have SEL for family and community. What do parents need to know before students return to school? What does my student's day look like? Support for staff, district-wide supports. I want to call our attention to the supports, again, specific to staff, some school choice supports, some SEL for staff school choice supports, carries on with some buddy system guidance there, possible staff survey information, and just a number of different considerations that in a short period of time have been put together and will continue to grow as our attempt to meet the needs, social and emotional needs of our students and staff. We will see that this document will continue to expand as we work toward those efforts. So we're getting close to the point here where we're wrapping it up, and I just want to share with you, as we have seen a number of different surveys have gone out, we have really sought to hear the voice of our staff, of our students, of our families, and as you can see there in the brief graphic, half of our families want to come back. We have put together some pretty darn good plans, and we're excited to have presented them tonight. Schools worked tirelessly to support their students in distance learning. They continue to do that. Our district departments have worked tirelessly to help support those efforts. And we are now at the juncture where we are saying, what is it going to take to bring our students back? And we think we have put together a pretty darn good set of plans here. So with half of our community wanting in-person learning, the message is clear. We are prepared to do this. We are prepared to support them and look forward to what can be a very healthy and productive fourth quarter return. And I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Gonzalez at this time.
So, as Mr. Islas stated in his opening letter in August, our plan for reopen, he stated, while many of the practices and procedures we have in place are for the safety and well-being of the entire Alhambra community, they're also into place because we care deeply about the health of each and every person involved. United in the education of our students, together we can overcome the challenges facing all of us. So before we get into questions, I want to share with you that it is so important you know and understand. This opportunity to return in person is really about coming together. It's about coming together with our students, coming together with our colleagues, the Alhambra family having that moment. It is not about academic progress, academic recovery, trying to gain those kinds of losses. It's about the experience of what it will feel like and be like to come back in as safe and as well planned as we possibly can. It's a chance for us to adjust. It's a chance for us to experience some normalcy. And it affords us the opportunity to reconnect and come back together as the Alhambra family. So as we move into questions, I want you to know that we have a wonderful representation of the many minds that put a lot of sleepless nights and busy days into this plan. They are here to answer your questions as best as possible. And so I turn the floor over to you, Madam President and Governing Board, for your questions.
Thank you. I would like to take a 2-minute break so that the board can gather their thoughts and questions, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start with Mr. Solario because he is here via the computer, so I want to make sure that he gets an opportunity to have his questions or comments heard.
Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Salario.
Oh, great. Yeah, just a couple of questions. I think it was, I mentioned last time that I think it was the Valencia campus had the highest number of respondents wanting to go in person. What kind of additional precautions or environment, physical environment setups is going to be occurring there since it appears that it will be the densest and hardest to space school. So that's one question. The other question being, I'm sure there's been training and stuff like that, but just wanting to know what was the plan for that was, pushed out to staff who will be working with students that are either really young and aren't necessarily they're still a little harder to follow directions, or students who are in special education programs who again just are harder to manage from a distance standpoint and what have you. So those are my two questions.
Thank you, Mr. Solario. Your first question about our Valencia school, we have mitigated many supports to ensure that safety protocols are in place, and Ms. Bilyeu will respond to your question.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Solorio. For Valencia, special attention has been provided to Valencia due to the unique nature of the student population that we serve there. We have afforded significant extra staffing to support all of the small group instruction, but we have also installed additional canopies to support as maximum amount of outdoor learning space. We have purchased additional furniture fixtures for the inside and furniture fixtures for the outside so that students' learning can continue seamlessly regardless of what setting they're sitting in. So from the HR department in supporting the staffing to our facilities department who supported all of the additional outdoor learning spaces and all of the furniture procurement, lots of attention has been applied to Valencia. I also know that the principal at Valencia is actively training the staff that she is hiring. So the new staff is getting extensive training. As soon as they are onboarded, she has worked with technology to make sure they get their device the very next day so that she can start training them as soon as she's not messing around. So as soon as they are put on staff, they have their device so that she can train them, and they are actually starting in observations of classrooms from the first day they start. So I believe we have a really nice plan in place for Valencia.
Thank you.
And Mr. Solario, to respond to your second question about our students with IEPs and the supports they will receive, Ms. Cremona is here to respond to your question.
Yes, related to the behavior concerns that might arise, in the Touchstone training, staff was trained more about trauma and some of the things that the students could have gone through and how they can be supportive in a trauma-informed environment and creating that for them. For some of our self-contained students who may have intellectual disabilities, we have the Positivity SEL curriculum that's able to support with learning more pro-social skills. For some of our other special education students, they can participate in the other SEL curriculums that we have that the Gen Ed students participate in as well. It'll be really important to go over all of the just processes and procedures and roles that we do at the beginning of every year so that we have those clear expectations but support when needed. If we do have situations where behaviors are becoming possibly a little unsafe or we're seeing some unexpected behaviors and we need that higher level of support, then we do have district level personnel who can go to the schools to help do some of that more coaching if we need to actually do like a functional behavior assessment or something like that to get more of a behavior intervention plan in place. So we have many layers of support to be able to support in that area for our students with disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Mr. Solario.
I think there was a second part of that, the younger kids.
Mr. Solario, do you mind repeating the second part to your question, please?
Yeah, it was just related. It's just what kind of training was put in place to make sure our staff are successful handling, younger students who might not necessarily be as kind of able to follow rules and whatnot.
Thank you for that question. Ms. Cohen is here to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Solario. A few weeks ago, our incredible district academic coaching team put together an instructional recommendation guidance doc for all of our teachers. And for younger children, all children, they really focused on ensuring strong collaboration activities and engagement activities were part of that training. So for example, what our teachers might find in the distance learning university and in the distance learning support guides are new engagement activities that will allow our in-person students and our distance learning students to work with each other through Google documents, like with math boards and anything that they can really engage in so that they're not having to listen to direct instruction, or they're more engaged and they don't have to have so much attention necessarily in the classroom for a long period of time, but instead we're focused on really increasing the engagement for those students to ensure that that quality instruction and instructional time is maximized for them. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Solario?
No other questions at the moment.
Thank you. So I'm going to just go down the line here, and I'm going to start with Mr. Oropeza.
Thank you for that presentation. As a parent, I've been able to observe the distance learning that's currently in effect. And one of my questions is that as we transfer to this, what changes to distance learning as is experienced right now will change in the hybrid or any of the VIP, DL, OCIP mechanisms that we have in place?
Thank you. Ms. O'Rourke will speak to your question.
So we've been very cognizant of the amount of training that our teachers are going to need in order to make this happen. So many of the classrooms will still continue the same distance learning model that they're doing, and they're just going to have students in front of them while still utilizing the technology for the at-home students. That's why some of our classrooms will continue distance learning the exact same way that it's been, depending on what the school has chosen as their model. For the VIP, the question that you had asked about the VIP model, there are 4 different options right now that we've trained our teachers on. And I believe in the slideshow there is a link that has those 4 different options. And we've trained all of our teachers on those 4 options. We've also provided opportunities, and through what Ms. Cohen had shared, we've provided opportunities for different strategies in the classroom that help with collaboration, or the teacher being able to give attention to one side of the room while the distance learning kids are working asynchronously, or vice versa.
Okay.
So.
I have another question for those schools that chose distance learning / OCIP. So my understanding is that all teachers are going to be on campus, even those who are under distance learning. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
all teachers will be on campus, except for if there are special circumstances, medical or, those teachers will be working with HR and their principals to decide what plan is best for them.
Okay. From a student standpoint, are they are those designated teachers? Are the students shifting teachers or
It
not?
depends. And I can't speak globally to every single school, but at my campus, I have 2 grade levels that have opted to not do the hybrid learning. So just to give you an example, my kindergarten team felt it would be best if they had just in person or just online. So one of my kindergarten teachers is going to teach just the online course, and the other 2 are going to take the in person. There's a little bit more students in the online because we wanted to keep the numbers lower for in-person. And because of that, I personally and the teachers are talking to every single parent to share what the change will be in their teacher. And they have actually collaborated just as a plan. Every Friday, they're going to all come together on a WebEx so that they can see their old teachers and work together as a team for that.
Okay.
Does that help
Yes,
answer
yes.
your question? Okay.
And one other, well, I'm sorry,
Oh,
one
sure.
more.
No.
Uh, what is the percentage breakdown of those? Actually, you just mentioned it's by grade. They're choosing by grade whether they're going to do VIP, OCIP, or DL.
That was up to the school. So the schools work
Okay.
collaboratively with their teams, as I shared. My school in particular, I did it by grade level,
Okay.
depending on numbers. There were lots of different factors that we spoke about. The departmentalization in the middle school, and just the age of the school, how many kids were coming back. Some schools have opted their whole school to do the VIP model. Some schools have opted the whole school to do the opposite, where there's only in person and only distance learning. So I have a combination at my school, and some of the schools have chosen that also.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If I can get, it doesn't have to be right now. If I can get a percentage breakdown. That's all for me. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. Mr. Conchas?
Hello. So I actually thought of a joke while while we were thinking. I was like, "Is there a nurse in the house?" Because yes, because I really appreciate this presentation, and it really seems how critical our nurses are going to be while on campus. And so, one of my questions is, how many nurses do we have on campus, or do we have enough? Which I'm assuming is yes, but just wanted to understand staffing of our nurses and making sure that they have the resources that they need to keep everyone safe.
Thank you for that question. And yes, we do have a nurse here. Ms. Moriarty will speak to your question.
Thank you. We have had a little bit of a difficulty in turnover during the pandemic with our staffing. So we are short a few nurses, but we are working with staffing agencies to bring some nurses in before we start and orient them to our processes. Each campus has one nurse or one full-time person in charge, sorry. So we expect to have a nurse on each campus supported by myself. I'm an RN, and our lead nurse is also an RN. We are receiving all sorts of support from our administration in terms of what we need to have, what kind of PPE we need to have, and what we will be doing in our isolation rooms and our health offices, because obviously we still need to care for our kids who have day-to-day needs. So we feel prepared and definitely ready to provide a safe environment.
Just another related question in terms of the isolation room and the just the regular nurse's office. How will that work? If there's one nurse on campus, or how will the staff kind of go back and forth, or what will the isolation rooms look like?
Good question. Most schools, especially our bigger schools, are staffed by a nurse and a health record keeper who is a largely clerical but helpful second person who's familiar with basic things like taking a temperature and documenting. They're bilingual, so they also serve as a translator for our nurses. So the way we envision it happening is In the morning after symptom screening, we assume the isolation room will have kids with symptoms primarily. And so we will close the health office to all but emergencies starting the school day. And both of those staff members will be in the isolation room to assess, process, notify parents, and move those kids out of the school building. Then it'll kind of be floating between both rooms. We've asked teachers on red level 1 to call before they send a student. So if no one's in the isolation room and we have a kiddo with a cough, we'll go up and meet that kid. So we'll always have the isolation room ready to receive a student. So we'll sort of be doing triage by phone on a lot of things. Obviously other stuff, scrapes, injuries, things like that will go to the health office, but that'll also require a call to make sure we've got a body there to receive that child.
And then in terms of contact tracing, are we doing it in the district, or are we having like the Maricopa County Public Health Department do that? Just a question on contact tracing.
That will kind of depend on where the case is identified. If Maricopa County is first advised of a student case, they call us and they will start the contact tracing. What's been going on through most of the pandemic due to their staff shortages and the numbers that we've had is that they've left the initial contact tracing to the schools. We have detailed guidance on how to start that, who to notify, how to notify them, how to figure out who the contacts were. So we've been doing that on our own right through this time with our learning spaces, which has really given our nurses an opportunity to put all of our plans in action on a micro level before we go macro. Fortunately, we've had very few cases, and we do anticipate having relatively few positives. I think we'll have a lot of kids with symptoms, but in terms of thinking of that quarantine and sending kids home, we're hoping between our mitigation measures and everything else we're doing that it'll be fairly rare that we get a positive case that we need to follow up on.
And one question in terms of, will we be testing our students, or is that a responsibility of the families or the parents? Just a question on testing.
Testing, fortunately, is much more widely available and more rapid now than it was, say, even a month ago or when we had our first surge. So we have lots of community support. We've had some testing events in the district. We are looking into doing some rapid antigen testing on campus. We have not finalized those plans yet. We'd like to do it.
Just one suggestion is for everyone is I saw that ASU is developing a smell test, and it's a scratch and sniff card, and it's because with COVID the loss of smell is one of the main symptoms. So they're developing it right now in terms of a scratch and sniff card for folks to determine if they may have COVID. So I just want to throw that out there because it may be something that in the future would be useful for rapid testing.
We will keep track on that. Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one thing in terms of equity. I see that in our agreement that the attestation that our families will need to sign, and it says I will take my child's temperature before school, which is a really good practice. Just wanting to acknowledge that maybe families don't have a thermometer right now, so maybe looking at public or private partnerships for them to have access to that.
Thank you for that awareness, and I believe Ms. Moriarty has some information for you.
We have offered every family a free thermometer this year through the KINSA thermometer program, which was a pre-existing program that was established to do flu tracking and became really important when we had a pandemic that had a febrile component. We have not had as much uptake as we would like to have. We've pushed it out through the district website, through Peach Jar, through our WhatsApp chat groups. I work at Valencia. Our parents surprisingly did not follow up as much as I had wanted. Other schools have had great success. ATS has been doing it for a couple of years. So they certainly have access to a really high quality digital thermometer for free. And the nurses will continue to make that available to parents. It does require some participation. You have to log in, you have to, sign up for an app. But that is certainly something going forward that all parents will have us to.
And then a question on masks. Will the students be required to have any certain type of mask, disposable, reusable? Will we be providing masks? Just a question on masks.
We are discouraging the use of gaiters or valved masks because those are not effective or can increase your transmission. But I'm told that we have bazillions of masks for students. And the mask is going to be our most important mitigating factor. So our message to teachers and to staff is to do not only masking, but correct masking. So nose covered, mouth covered, mask that fits, and encouraging kids to wear their masks properly because that is our biggest mitigation factor.
And Mr. Conchas, I believe Ms. Bilyeu can add more information to your question.
Bazillion is an accurate figure. We actually have had we've been fortunate to be able to secure significant numbers of masks. They are all available via our warehouse. Principals can order them. They are free to the site. The district is covering that cost. We have also partnered with multiple agencies who have provided hundreds and hundreds of, well, probably 100,000 masks. So a significant pile has been provided to each site of cloth masks that they can provide students if they come to school without a mask, that we can provide a mask that they can actually use on an ongoing basis. And then they also have a significant supply of disposable masks. So we are covered on both the cloth mask front and the disposable mask front, all at no cost to the schools using some of our COVID relief funding.
And then this is a really nitpicky question. So the CDC or at least Dr. Fauci has mentioned double masking, just as I am right here. Will we be encouraging single or double masking?
Currently, we're encouraging just masking. However, we are able to provide additional masks if the family feels safer and the student wants to or the staff wants to double mask.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conchas. Ms. De Ocampo?
Well, the beauty of going forth is that most of the questions have been answered. So all the questions before me. I do have a concern about the ventilation. Make sure that our maintenance people feel that the upgrade of the filters, changing of the outdoor air coming in is going to be sufficient to address the needs of our classrooms and the safety of our staff and faculty and students.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Mr. Shields is here to respond to your question.
Madam President, ONeill, France, governing board members, Mr. Islas, I'd like to answer that question, Ms. Ocampo. The district has taken a number of measures in regards to ventilation because of the concern that one of the things that was mentioned in the presentation earlier this evening was the fact that we were changing from MERV 8 filters to MERV 13. That's a big one for us. The CDC is recommending it. The MERV 13 filters are a filter that's thicker that will catch more particulates and will reduce any concern with that. Number one, it's 5 levels higher than what we currently are doing. In addition to that, we are required by law to have 25% of outdoor fresh air coming into our classroom learning spaces. So we've taken that initiative and taken that a little bit farther. District-wide, we have opened up those air dampers to bring in fresh air from the outside to the maximum allowable that we can on the units that we do have to provide continuous flow of outdoor air. Last but not least, there was one other thing I forgot to mention. Was the outdoor air, the filters, and then obviously our district is very proactive in replacing units that are aging and old and getting new energy efficient units that will also help with that ventilation as well.
So the exchange is by classroom?
Correct.
If it's a classroom that has a packaged rooftop unit, a RTU, that unit has an outdoor air damper that brings fresh air into the classroom space that we can also adjust fans. We can have fans continuously running to be bringing that fresh air into the classroom space.
Because there isn't a problem at schools like the Choice Learning Academy where everybody has a door they can open outside. It's the indoor spaces.
Correct. The concept is the same at those schools as well.
Okay, then I continue to have a well, let me do the preschool first. Explain to us what was going to happen in the kindergarten classrooms. I'm curious about what's going to happen in the preschool classrooms. They're a little bit hard to keep separated. And they like to touch everything.
Mr. Shields was going to try to answer that one. So, thank you for your question, Ms. De Ocampo. Ms. Billy will speak more in depth to our preschools.
Thank you for your question. In our preschool programs, we have added an additional layer of support due to the developmental level of the students. So in those programs, they have regular cleaning of any manipulatives and also carts to support AM and PM sessions. They also have individualized packaged materials for students or have moved to things that can support the learning objective that is also disposable. They've also so the developmental preschool also has the layers of support that you heard from Ms. Cremona, because those kids, as you know, may require a little more handling or physical support. And so the staff is also outfitted with higher levels of PPE so that they can do more hand over hand if the student requires those kinds of things. But the cleaning cycle of the materials in the preschool is much more significant, and they also have very designated spaces that they have outlined in the classroom, like floor space, table space. So depending on the learning objective, they have ensured the maximum social distancing. And you're right, it is going to take a bit of training for our youngest learners, but you also have a similar level of return, so you'll have fewer humans in the classroom. More adults, fewer little bodies.
And you're talking about Head Start as well as?
Yep, Head Start and developmental.
Okay. I want to recognize all the hard work that everybody, significant that we've involved so many people in making sure that all voices were heard. I also want to acknowledge all the people who have sent me messages about their concerns. I feel it is important that our children, as many as want to, can come back to school. I want to be assured that the teachers aren't going to have extra responsibilities. I'm concerned about the high intensity that's involved in the what I call the hybrid model. I think that's very difficult for a teacher to have students at home and students in a classroom. And I want to make sure that we are providing enough resources for those teachers to not be overstressed and break down because it's too much for them to handle. It's not a very professional way to say it, but I am very concerned about that, which brings me to the Wednesdays that I understand are supposed to be for teacher preparation. I want to make sure that we hold those days sacred, for a better word, for the staff, and that's not just the teachers, it's instructional assistants that work in those classrooms, so that they have the time to get ready for because they're going to be doing double duty when they're teaching, both online and in the classroom. And there was a question in there somewhere.
Thank you so much. Yes, I feel we have heard loud and clear that teachers are going to need as much time as possible on those Wednesdays to prepare for their teaching and for student learning. And we know that we are jumping into something we haven't done before. And with that kind of change and transition, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some getting used to. And it's going to take a little bit of learning a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, and a lot of it's okay. Every day, it's okay. We did a good job this day. So what I've heard greatly in conversations I've had with principals for those teams that have chosen that virtual in-person model, that one that sounds more challenging, is really that they didn't want to give up their kids. They wanted to be able to stay connected with all of their students. And I understand. I loved my babies, no matter if they were little babies or bigger babies. And so we know that it does bring on another layer of work and responsibility. But as we've shared today, we have worked very hard to be thoughtful of that and to provide trainings, materials, supports to help those teachers understand what it's going to look like, what it might be like, easier ways to manage that. As Ms. Cremona spoke, we have a lot of SEL supports for our adults as we do for our students. As Ms. O'Rourke spoke, she's allowing for classes to be covered so teachers can observe each other and get ideas. So we definitely know that challenges will arise, but we are in this together and we are passionate about supporting each other through this and hearing our teachers when they're telling us that it's difficult. On those Wednesdays, we are committed to giving our teachers as much time as we can. There will be those Wednesdays where principals need to get in front of their teams for that essential information. But our principals know that that's what that time is for, essential information. It isn't for additional or unnecessary training or information. Anything that is in addition can be communicated through videos, through emails, through a lot of other electronic ways. We have learned that. So we are very cognizant and conscientious about knowing our teachers need time.
I do have concerns about the teachers who, I understand the philosophy behind the idea of the teachers move and not the students. But I think that that puts an extra level of concern. Teacher that's moving from class to class, don't mean just the teachers. Talking about your speech clinicians, your occupational therapists, who are now going to be moving around from here to there, working with multiple groups of students. What have we put in place to help those people to make sure that they're going to have some safety?
Thank you. Ms. Cremona will respond to your question.
And it's not just speech clinicians and occupational therapists. I'm talking about the 8th grade English language teacher who's going to now move from classroom to classroom, or a band teacher.
So for our occupational therapists and speech pathologists, if the student's IEP indicates that they need push-in services, so maybe they push into a self-contained classroom, they will have additional PPE available to them, face shields, smocks, gloves, things that might make them feel more comfortable. For students whose IEP indicates that they will have pull-out services, we will be able to go ahead and pull the students out of the class and take them to the speech OT or resource room. A nice thing, because those groups are usually smaller, is that we'll be able to cohort them and distance them. So those should be very safe environments where they're with similar classmates and they have more space available to them. So those are a couple of ways that we're looking at both of those areas.
Thank you for that. Now, the band teacher, traveling science teacher.
And Ms. O'Rourke will speak to that question.
Good evening. So just to give you a picture of what we've planned on our campus and what we've been collaborating with principals, our teachers that are moving from classroom to classroom, they're working together as a team to ensure that all of their classrooms are set up with a 6-foot space in the front of the room by the smartboard so that they are not in with the students unnecessarily. So they're all setting up their classroom similarly. So when they do move from classroom to classroom, they have that walkway, a 6-foot area from the door around into the front of the classroom. And that's consistent with all of the classes. Mr. Rivera provided guidance for all of the classrooms in the district that have those guidance in, so that all of our teachers are in that same situation. So we have a plan at Madrid, and I know this plan is at other schools too, where we have a coverage person that will start with one of the classrooms and stand at the door so that the teacher can leave, move to the next room, the next teacher can move to the next room, so that the students aren't left unsupervised, but then also the teachers are safe coming in and out of the classroom.
And we are providing each classroom with cleaning intermittent.
Yes, we are. We are making sure that our teachers are prepared. If they're traveling with items, that they're prepared with cleaning materials and that they're also housed in the classroom. And Mr. Combs can speak more through his lens about your question.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Ocampo. I actually am the traveling science teacher. I mean, I have a classroom normally, but this year I'll be the traveling science teacher. And I really have no concern. I've already worked together with my team. We've planned our teacher transitions, what we're going to do to go from class to class. We're going to bring our laptop, and a lot of the delivery of things that we're going to be doing this year is going to be digital anyway. It's kind of what's built into the healthy traffic light, is that we have hybrid, we have kids that are going to be at home. So all the things are going to have to be delivered digitally. So it's really not an issue of having to carry supplies from place to place. While we're on red level 1, the band teacher, the choir teachers, music teachers, they're doing the same thing. Where they're going to be using the iPads, they're not going to be singing or playing instruments. That's what's built into the Healthy Traffic Light plan.
Okay, I've read the CDC guidelines. I've read the report from all the pediatricians that say it's really quite safe for students to be back in school. I read the articles about Rhode Island, which has kept their schools open. I think that our plan is equally as good as what I have seen in other districts, not in Arizona, but other districts in other states. I will continue to have concerns, as we all will, but there reaches a point where you have to just make a step forward. If we're ever going to move forward, we have to put one foot in front of the other and take the chance. Not take a chance, take the step. I originally did not think this was a good idea. I still don't think it's a good idea if we're going to wait until May. But I do think opening in March is feasible. I do think we can learn from that experience. And I think that by opening in March, we will, and by then having some opportunities for students to learn during the summer, it will make the transition in August when we open a lot smoother. I do realize that in preschool, we spend the first month establishing routines and procedures in the classrooms and getting the children used to what they have to do. That's going to be time that's maybe lost from learning at this point in time, but it's already March. If we can get those students used to being back in a classroom now, rather than sitting crisscross applesauce on their sofa in their pajamas, we will have bought time in August when we come back to school. I know there are people out there that are worried, and we've given them the choice to keep their children home. Staff, hope we've done as much as we can. I think we've tried as hard as we can to make them safe. I think it is time that we forward students back on campus. Thank you. Oh, I had one more question. The materials that are going to be used in the classroom, how are the students at home going to have access to those same materials? Or I guess, well, the answer that I heard was everything's going to be done electronically. Is that true?
Ms. O'Rourke will respond.
We are working right now to make individual learning kits and packets for every single student. And so we are giving every student all the materials that they will need. So if a student is staying home, they're going to get the same materials that the students in class will get. We're putting ours in just individual bags for every student. We're going to do another rollout, and what that is families that are staying at home can come through and pick up the materials, in a drive-through fashion like we have all year. We've done it every quarter since we've started school. And then the students that are staying in class, they will just get their packet to keep in their personal space at their desk in the classroom. So that's how we're handling to make sure they both have all the materials they need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of planning has gone into this, and I really do appreciate it. What is the limit for students in a class?
So we are able to take the capacity of the students that are interested in coming in person. We can bring them. If 20 students want to come into a classroom, we can accept 20 students. If 25 students want to come into a classroom, we can accept 25. With how our survey has responded, it has afforded us the opportunity to know that about half of our students in the district and per school are going to be distance learning. So that allows us with the idea that we know we're going to have fewer students in the classroom than if it was normal time and all students were back in person. So we are looking to have anywhere from 15 to 20, but I will let Ms. O'Rourke respond even more specifically to her campus.
So a plan that we put into place at Madrid is we made sure that if there was an uneven balance in classrooms, for example, if there was one class that had 16 students that wanted to return in person and one class that had 4 students, we worked as a team, and that's where the grade level situation came in, and we talked about moving students that were in person to even out the number of students that are in person. There are classrooms on my campus where there are 15, 16 students in the class. And so what we've done for that situation is we've made sure that the furniture in that class, we replaced them with smaller desk sizes. So I know one of our first grade teams, they've had those big desks with the side. We took those out and we're putting in smaller desks so that they're able to sit at least 3 feet apart from each other. And so we're trying to even out so that our classroom sizes aren't uneven and one teacher doesn't have 20 kids and one teacher has 10.
Is there a limit?
In person.
Is there a limit, though, for how many kids can be in a classroom?
No, there is not a limit to how many students can be in a classroom. And we feel that with all of the safety protocols we have wrapped around not only the plan, but knowing that people are able to be vaccinated at this time, that it provides us every safety measure to be able to accept the students that are wanting to return in person, despite the number.
So I'm going to revisit that question when we start school in August.
Okay.
Sorry, I just, I have an issue with putting too many students at this time in a classroom, and I'm going to have the same problem in August with that many kids in a classroom.
Ms. ONeill, France, what we could do for you after we return on the 18th, we can give you a full report on the class size and the amount of students in every classroom, so we can continue to have some conversation. But we can definitely give you that as soon as the kids report on the 18th. Okay.
Thank you. I understand that this decision is going to be made by the 5th, whether we are for sure coming back on the students are coming back on the 18th, teachers on the 15th. Are we able to have that on the 4th during our board meeting so that we can all get the message at the same time?
Actually, we have hit all the things that we needed to put in place for a return date on the 18th, and the students on the 18th and teachers on the 15th of March. And I've been asked by the principals, because they've been asked by their teachers, to actually make that announcement sooner. And I will be making that announcement tomorrow after we get through this presentation, that we will be returning on the 18th for students and the 15th for kids.
Okay, thank you. At this point, are we marking students tardy, or if a student shows up, are they here for the day?
So our typical procedures are in place, determining if a student comes late enough to be marked as tardy or not. We're following all of those guidelines that we have for our state. But if a student shows up, they are able to attend for the day. I'm not sure if that answered your question. If I didn't answer, would you mind
So do
clarifying?
you do morning and afternoon attendance?
We are not doing, like in August when we do a warm body count or attendance in the morning and the afternoon, we are not doing that at this time. That's a process that we typically do at the beginning of the year to get that 10-day count of students for enrollment purposes. We are not going to need to do that starting now as we return in fourth quarter.
So right now, if a student shows up at 10 o'clock, they are marked tardy. They are not marked present for the whole day.
I will let Ms. Billy respond to your question.
Thank you. Currently, because of the flexibility afforded us through our approved distance learning model, we mark students present or not present. There are multiple ways that a student can provide evidence of present. I believe there's 5, and staff have been trained on what to look for that equals evidence of present. So currently there are no tardies.
Okay, perfect. So now that we're changing back to site times and students will be coming on campus, are we going to be holding, is our attendance policy the same for online versus in person? So if I'm in person and I show up at 10 o'clock, am I tardy or do I have the same advantage of an online student?
They still will be continued to be marked present or absent. The tardy feature is in place for safety because a teacher takes attendance by a certain time so that we can notify parents if they are here or not. So our tardy procedure is in place to make sure that we know where kids are. If they come in late, the office is taking attendance for them, and so they are marking in via a tardy kiosk. You know what I mean? So they are marked tardy, but they're still considered present. And during this time, I mean, while we want to encourage perfect and on-time attendance, we are still going to be marking them present or absent. But the tardy feature is in place for on-campus learners just because we have to make sure they're safe and we know where they are.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I heard outside teaching. Personally, I can only handle about 15 to 20 minutes in May on my duty outside. I can't imagine being a teacher with a mask on, let alone all those students, sitting outside in May teaching. Are there other alternatives in place for those schools that are teaching outside?
So I think we will be getting very creative as the temperature changes, but yes, we have our larger rooms, we have our libraries, we have our multi-purpose rooms, we have our gymnasiums. All of those opportunities afford us different spaces to have rather than the outside space. It may take some creative scheduling, creative opportunities on the campus, but we do have other spaces to accommodate for weather.
Okay, thank you. And I know there's a lot of conversation regarding the younger grades, but I didn't hear this, and I apologize if I missed it. Are we having extra support in the younger grades? I see runners all the time. Are we making sure that Miss O'Rourke's kinders are not all over campus? Are we getting extra support in those K1, especially K1, because first grade was only here pretty much for half a year last year? Are we making sure that we are getting the extra support in those classrooms?
Yes, we are putting forth every effort to add positions to every campus so that we have extra hands, more than what we currently have, to be able to be exactly that. And Ms. O'Rourke can speak more to her campus.
Ms. O'Rourke, not that your kinders would run.
Never.
I'm not saying that.
Never, never. So we're very cognizant of that also, and many of our primary one assistants, they actually are assigned to those classrooms. And I'm just going to give for an example, our kinder assistants have been with our kinder teachers the entire time online, supporting that way. We've also been afforded the opportunity to increase the hours of many of our assistants, in fact, most of them on our campus, so that they are there from the start of the day till the end of the day. And so that's been something that's been afforded to all the schools also. So yes, we
Thank
have
you.
a plan for that.
Thank you. I just know I don't enjoy running after kindergarten students. I think they're running away from me is the problem. That was it for my questions, but I would like to go around one more time to the board to see if they had any other questions that came up. Mr. Solario?
Other questions for me?
Thank you. Mr. Oropeza?
None for me.
Thank you. Mr. Conchas?
Hello. So coming into this, I was not very comfortable with our students returning to campus, but after this presentation, it gives me a little bit more assurance. I do have some concerns, and the concerns is our nurse staff. I heard that we don't have nurses at 2 sites, if that's correct.
Ms. Moriarty will come up and confirm your question.
We actually have 3 sites, Westwood, James W. Rice, and Catalina, who are without nurses. And through the process of the additional staff that we can obtain through the increased funding, we're going to add a nurse at the campus that serves Valencia, Gap, and the ALC. We were able to onboard 4 new nurses this year and had no vacancies, but through the course of the pandemic, we lost 3 for reasons that remain somewhat mysterious because it probably was because they were onboarding during a pandemic. There was very little to do. They were new to school nursing, and they sought other alternatives, which all nurses have. I'm concerned too. But we've had a lot of success in the past working with staffing agencies who seek nurses who have school experience. We found some really high quality people who we've wanted to try to capture for ourselves. So we're working very closely right now with an outside staffing agency. We have 3 people lined up who seem like they will be able to start. We've been given permission to bring them in a few days early. So as I said, we can orient them to our processes, and they'll be obligated to stay through the school year, and then hopefully we can continue them into the summer, because with our increased summer school needs, we're going to need those people to do not only nursing care, but the isolation, the symptom screening, and things like that. I share your concern. We're working very hard.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Conscious. Just to follow up with what Ms. Moriarty shared, it's true. We are going to be working very feverishly and heavy to add some robust marketing and be marketing in some different areas for additional nurses. We've increased hours to our health record keeping assistants, even adding those individuals as well to our staffing teams. In addition, we work with outside agency, just like Ms. Moriarty mentioned, to ensure contracted employees when we cannot hire them ourselves. But we will be beefing up our marketing and hiring and working to recruit as many nurses as we can.
And do we have a goal date of when to hire those 3 nurses?
We are now yesterday. We're working currently to get them to get it moving. If we can't hire them through Alhambra and through as our own employees, just like we mentioned before, we contract with agencies, and we do it that way. And we've done it in the before, so we a particular agency. So, and Ms. Moriarty wants to share some more.
I failed to mention that I staff offices when they're uncovered, as does our other lead nurse, who's also a BSN. So obviously we'll step in. We kind of feel like we'll be pretty stretched in the first few days because we've got so much going on so many campuses, but we never leave a school uncovered or meds uncovered or procedures uncovered. We often have office staff or all the millions of helpers that are here help us, but we plan coverage day to day, and I see myself in a health office if there's not another long-term staff member there.
So just in direct answer to your question, we will not be unstaffed. There will be a nurse on every campus. We will ensure that a contracted nurse is in place, if we don't secure an Alhambra staff member, there will not be an Alhambra campus without a nurse.
And you committed it, but I just want to make sure that by March 18th, every single site will have a nurse.
Yes, sir.
I have a legal question. So in terms of the worst case scenario, if any of our staff were to die, does the district hold responsibility for that?
I'm going to pass it over to our legal counsel, Mr. Stratman.
That's an easy question. Actually, that's a very loaded question. There's so many different scenarios, but what's been shared, my own opinion, and what's shared amongst my colleagues in the Council of School Attorneys, it's a safe environment to return to for employees. Whether the district shares liability in any harm to an employee boils down to whether the district engaged in negligent behaviors. You can see by the presentation, this district is taking all reasonable precautions to keep staff safe, even in a global pandemic. So you would be hard pressed, I think, to find a scenario where the district would be at fault for somebody's death just by contracting COVID and then dying. So I hope that answers your question. There's just a lot to that. We would have to contact trace, did that person even contract that here, or did they contract it somewhere else, at a wedding, funeral, wherever? There's so many different scenarios. I can never guarantee that somebody won't sue the district, but it's a question of how strong that lawsuit is and what defenses we have against it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I have a question about our OSIP only students. So I'm not sure how many OSIP only we have, but a question on when those, if I'm going to say if, because we don't want it to happen. If any of those students in OSIP only are in have to quarantine, what will their instruction look like in that scenario?
I will have Ms. O'Rourke speak to that.
So the plans in place at the school level is if they're OSIP only, they will go into a distance learning classroom. So for example, my second grade, there's 2 in person and 1 on campus. The teachers are planning together. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. 2 in person and 1 distance learning. Our teachers are planning together. And so if any of the students in the in-person class happen to have to quarantine, we're going to move them into the distance learning class and they will receive the same instruction from the other 2 classrooms. If it's a hybrid model, if they would just move right into that distance learning portion in that same classroom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then this is just a really lighthearted one. Like, sorry for all the serious stuff. The isolation room. When I saw the name of it, I was like, isolation room. That sounds like solitary confinement. Like, can we call it like the rainbow room or something? Something a little lighthearted so our students don't feel like they're going into isolation. But that's just a small suggestion. But that's all my questions for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Del Campo?
I would like an explanation of when we decide, how we decide if we are going to close a classroom to school, how we are going to handle that if it becomes necessary.
Thank you. Ms. Moriarty will respond. We have a partnership of Mr. LaLiberty and Ms. Moriarty.
And Mr. Laliberte, thank you so much for all the information you keep sending us.
Ms. De Ocampo, thank you for asking your question. We report all of our cases to the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, and we work in conjunction with them in order to make decisions about closing down classrooms or closing down schools as well. They've got they've had a bit of a backlog of cases, so they're not always right up on top of it. That's why it's so important that we do our job in contact tracing and making sure that we're on top of that. But they will always follow up with us and they will determine if we need to close down a classroom or close down a school as well.
Thank you for that answer, and thank you for all the information you've been giving us all these weeks and months in this situation. I have been watching on the dashboard, and our numbers are improving, so it's a good sign.
I just want to briefly add to that, just from strictly a legal perspective. Some of that is just a feel on when it's right to do that based on what's happening at a campus. And I just want to be clear, you don't have to request permission from the Department of Health or anything. The superintendent always has that executive authority to close a school if he feels there's an outbreak situation that needs to be addressed right away. I just don't want you to think if there's a backlog that he's explaining at the Department of Health that we're waiting to make a decision. Mr. Islas always has the executive authority to make that decision to close a campus if he feels it's important to do that for the health and safety of the students and staff.
What I more was looking at when I read the plan that held Rhode Island in good stead through these past months was they did not just jump to close a school. They classroom or they down a grade level. I was hoping that that is similar to what we are looking at and do your word to do isolated closing of classrooms rather than the whole.
You're right. Rhode Island has done a great job. As Stephen explained, that critical element of the seating charts and knowing who was where and who was exposed to whom should prevent having to close an entire classroom. It's schools, I don't know if you read the reports on Georgia, it's schools like Georgia where their students weren't cohorted, where you had to exclude an entire class or exclude an entire grade. We've been working hand in hand with Maricopa County Public Health since a year ago, and they really don't want to close schools, and they don't have the regulatory power to do that. But they're really willing to work with us and consult with us if we're in a position where we think that might be necessary. But their bias is towards staying open. They recognize the need for our kids to be in school, and they've said that repetitively throughout the entire year. So I would find it very hard to believe we would ever have to close a whole school campus or even a whole classroom unless there had been, for some reason, a big lapse in our mitigation.
Georgia's not the model. I've been, maybe this is my last say that, and then I have one. Substitutes. How are we going to deal with when a teacher or a classified is all of a sudden has to be home for quarantining 14 days? Mr. Liliberta has this all figured out, but I'd like to hear it just so I'm confident that we've worked it all out.
Thank you. He's here to share.
Thank you, Ms. De Ocampo. So primarily, we are going to be having, as it's been brought up a number of times this evening, we've staffed up all of our schools to have instructional assistants that can actually step into those classrooms that would actually already be in place. And that's how we've been doing really all of our guest, 90% of all of our guest teaching this year so far. In addition to that, we'll be looking to some of our people who are our early retirees that have received their vaccinations as well that would be able to come back. They would probably be more in the way of long-term guest teachers that would be able to help. But primarily, it's going to be the people that we already have on campus, and we've ramped those numbers up considerably in preparation for the return to school.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I have a quick comment. Tonight was actually supposed to be equity training for our board. But I do believe there is a sense of equity here that I want to just highlight. We either can preach equity and not do it, or we can do it. And the equity question here is, will we serve marginalized students that that need to be in-person learning? It's going to be difficult, obviously. There's a lot of work that is done and will be doing. But the truth is that it's worth serving our marginalized students. And so I know we are should we go into this learning system, we are asking a lot of our teachers. Maybe one of the biggest challenges of their career. But the truth is that I just ask them to do it to the best of their ability, and that the reason for it is sound and it's worth it. It's worth to do this, and I believe they can because we have some of the best teachers in the state. So, we're behind you in this, but it is an equity question that we really want to consider with this decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for the presentation. And hearing no other comments, we will go ahead and move to C, meeting close. C1, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Oropeza. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Conchas. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting closed. Thank you.